everybody. Welcome to another episode of Psyched for Psychology. My name is Krista. I'm here with my trusty sidekick, Brett.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, everybody. And we thought it would be a great time to tackle the topic of the holidays and how to be empowered in the holiday season. There's a lot going on in the holiday season, don't you think?
There is. And it's overwhelming, and we can find ourselves feeling at the whim of everybody else and everybody else's plans and expectations.
Yep.
And so it can be a very disempowering experience for us at the holidays. And I think that there's so many reasons for anxiety and stress. And this is just one of many that we thought we could highlight today because it just does not feel very empowering. Because I can feel like I'm sort of kowtowing to everybody else and their expectations, their desires, what we're going to eat, when we're going to eat, all sorts of things like that. So this is, I think, highly relevant, and I'm glad we're going to talk about it.
Me too. What comes to mind for me about the holidays and kind of what people can be aware of is the first thing that comes to mind is like family gatherings. So for Thanksgiving, for Christmas, or for whatever you celebrate during the holidays, there's usually some sort of family get-together, right? And it occurs to me that sometimes there's like unresolved issues in the family, and therefore you're faced with, okay, it's my family on the one hand, because there's this thing about I feel like I have to. Basically, I think people think I have to spend time with my family because it's the one time a year where families get together, right? Well, what if in the family there's an alcoholic or there's somebody, who's out of control with something or abusive or, right? And I should say an alcoholic who's not sober, right? So basically, how do you cope with that? Then you also have, so we've got the family gatherings. Then we have, you haven't seen these people in a while and can be awkward, right? There's politics. There's, people want to talk about politics. People want to talk about the news. People want to talk about all sorts of stuff. And it's like, I don't know if I really want to get into a heated debate with my family. Right?
And you might feel that way, and yet somebody else doesn't care because they're so passionate about this topic.
Yes. And they're like, oh, we're going there.
We're going there. And you're like, oh, and you're like, great. What do I do?
Yeah.
And how do I respond to this? Because that's another disempowering kind of example right there.
Yep, exactly. So can you think of any other factors?
Yeah, I think also at the holidays, especially when we haven't seen people in a while, what do I talk about?
Yeah.
We don't know. I think this lost art of small talk.
Yes.
And I think people look at small talk and see it as sort of superficial and unnecessary. And actually, small talk is very important to establishing a connection with people. So I think we've sort of poo-pooed it and oh, it's just so superficial. And in reality, it's kind of a warm-up phase, and you're looking for opportunities to connect with somebody. In that small talk, you find some point of common ground or connection. Then you can go deeper. But people, I think we don't know what to say.
Yes.
And so we can talk about that a little bit too.
I love that.
And I think you had one other area you wanted to talk about.
Yes, which was your mental health.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think people forget that you can always cope ahead. And you can always, again, as many of these items about the holidays that you can decide in advance, the better. Because once we get in a situation, we tend to revert back to what we're used to. And that's especially the case with our family of origin. Because we all get together, and no matter how much therapy you've done or how strong your boundaries are, you get with your family of origin or, the people that you grew up with, right? And all bets are off. I mean, I've heard this countless times from clients. I've even experienced this myself, where I'll go into a situation and something will come up that I wasn't expecting, and I revert right back to my middle child, people-pleasing, peacemaking, right?
I've heard it put this way. No matter how much you grow up, when you go home, you always grow down.
Okay, there you go. Yes, so it's good to just be aware of
And that feels very disempowering too, because
absolutely.
And maybe let's just start there. This could be kind of fun. So we kind of all have different roles. That would be kind of a fun podcast sometime about the different roles we play
Yes.
in our families. And so we can be, the peacemaker, we can be the leader, we can play all different kinds of roles. I can be the quiet, good kid. And so what happens is sometimes we carry that into all of our relationships in adulthood, and other times we move away from that. It's sort of liberating, like, hey, I'm not that kid anymore. And then even though we've grown past that, as soon as we go home, immediately we go right back into those roles again, and we play those roles. And to change that and be something different, now you're not meeting up to everybody else's expectations. And well, you and I are marriage family therapists, which means we're systems therapists. So there's a whole system of operation that's based on rules and regulations within that family of origin. And we're disrupting that. It causes a lot of anxiety if I don't play my role again.
Exactly. And one of the best ways to kind of be prepared for that is to decide in advance about, you can get as, minuscule as you want, right? So I'm talking about things like, okay, if my mom and my sister start to get into an argument, what am I going to do?
Right.
Right. So, and even just playing it through in your mind, like, okay, what are my options? I could leave the room. I could excuse myself. I could get busy with something else. I could, get involved. Right.
Super powerful what you just said. What are my options? I think when we go home, we subconsciously go back into those roles.
Exactly.
And we don't realize we have options.
I completely agree.
And it's it's kind of like an animal. When I love those videos of dogs that are like on the streets and they're afraid, and then people kind of work their way to build trust with them, and then they go live with the people, and they flourish. And it's inspiring to me. And I think of animals like that. When they're in a corner, they lash out. They're scared, and they have a lot of anxiety. Why? Because there's no options. So I just wanted to highlight that. Going into the holidays, it's important to know we have options, and that is really integral to empowering ourselves for the holidays.
I agree. Another example is, let's say you're someone who you tend to stay longer than you want to, or you I always say, if you don't have a plan, you're going to get pulled into something and then later maybe feel resentful, right? So you can decide in advance, how long am I going to stay, right? You can decide how long am I going to go just for the meal? Am I going to go for the prep? Am I going to go for the cleanup, or stay for the cleanup, or kind of whatever? Maybe my cue to leave is like when the drinks come out, if you're someone who's trying to have sobriety, right? And for some families, that's, the whole time,
before you even get there.
Right. And again, it's not about looking down on people who are doing different, who might be choosing to drink. It's all about what you're comfortable with. So it's not about making anybody wrong. It's not about saying you're better or worse. It's more like, am I okay being around alcohol, or whatever the case might be? Right.
Yep. Could be alcohol, or Aunt Betty, or it could be
sugar.
Definitely sugar. It can be, food is definitely a stressor. And we can feel very disempowered because all this great food is out and it's just sitting there. And we're kind of conditioned a lot of times when food is available and free, we just sort of mindlessly keep going to it.
Well, and then have you ever noticed too how people will comment about what other people are eating? So
my goodness!
For example, I've had times with any given group. It doesn't even have to just be family. Where if I choose not to have dessert, well, why aren't you having dessert? Right. Or if I don't have enough on my plate, well, that's not very much food, right? And it's just like, okay, this is a boundary issue, right? Yes. So just be prepared. It's like if someone comments, or if somebody pressures me about, oh, you're not going to even have one little piece of pie, right? It's like, no, it's my choice. I choose what I ingest, right?
And what I think you're saying is I choose what I ingest.
Yes.
I choose now.
Yes, exactly.
I choose now before I go to Thanksgiving celebration, Christmas. And that can mean any holiday celebration, whether it's with family, it could be with a company. There's lots of different parties for holidays. And we can establish and choose right now when am I going to go? What am I going to eat?
Yep.
Who am I going to associate with? Who am I not going to associate? What am I not going to do?
Right.
And we can make that decision now. And you mentioned cope ahead.
Yes.
Which is one of the DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy skills that we talk about. And we like to highlight that we try to cope in the middle of it. So somebody says, why aren't you having dessert? That's when we try to cope with it. But we're already stressed now and we don't think as clearly. And so we can cope today ahead of time.
There you go.
Where I'm not as stressed. And I can also, part of coping ahead is figuring what I'm going to say, establish a boundary, and then you rehearse it over and over and over again.
Yep.
And you rehearse that relative or that person at the company party even who is going to make the comment and what you're going to say.
Yep.
And you rehearse that, you visualize it over and over again. You even allow yourself to feel a little bit of the distress that goes along with that as you rehearse it, as you visualize it, and you visualize yourself doing this perfectly in a very healthy way and coming away feeling just terrific about yourself.
Great. I'm glad you added that last part because, even picturing how do I want to feel during and after this interaction, right?
And it's no different than what athletes do. Professional athletes.
I was literally just thinking that. Yes, about like how they plan in advance and imagine, right?
Right. Yeah. They're just visualizing making that game-ending game-winning play, whatever, and so
did we ever talk about Michael Phelps? How he used to envision himself. He was so afraid his goggles would fall off during a race. He would envision himself over and over and over. My goggles fell off. Because he wanted to, it was swimmers. So I was a swimmer in high school. So this this analogy really resonated because it's like you could do the same thing you've done every time. And for some reason your goggles flip off when you dive in. Right? Because it's just like the water catches them weird or your head's out a weird angle. Yeah. So, and when that happens as a swimmer, you are counting each stroke because you're like, I can't see a thing. And you have to know when to turn at the end of the lane. So he rehearsed. Sure enough, the Olympics. It's like the final countdown, right? Yeah. And his goggles fall off. He still won the gold because he had imagined it. So that's kind of a little side note. But again, it's the power. Relevant. Yes. It's the power of imagine the outcome you want. Imagine even if something unexpected happens, right? Imagine what you want to do about it. Right. And it's really powerful.
Oh, I haven't heard that story. Isn't love that story. Great story. I'm glad you brought it up. And it is very applicable to how we want to he was coping ahead. And that's what we want to do. We want to cope ahead into the holidays and identify what are the stressors, the situations, the people, and what I'm going to do. How am I going to say no? What am I going to do to say no? And why I'm, when people say, oh, how come you're leaving early?
Yeah, good one. That's a good one.
You guys where just got going? Here. Right. Yeah, where are you going? And rehearsing in our mind that this is what I'm going to say. Yeah, we got to go. I got to get up early for work tomorrow. Or we just need to leave. One thing as a little caveat I want to say is when people are asking for explanations, you are not obliged to give an explanation. I always tell people when you give a reason, you allow other people to determine if your reason is reasonable.
Exactly.
That's disempowering.
Yes, and you brought up such a great example of where you're leaving already, right? And then that's where you feel like you should explain that moment of like, I should tell them why I'm leaving, or like, and it might. I mean, I've even like in without coping ahead, I've even like made something up, and then I don't feel great about that, right? Yeah. So you can just because I'm like, oh well, what do you say without giving a reason, right? And I've learned to say kind of like, yep, it's time to go.
I love that.
Right?
Yeah, it's time to go.
And it was, and say like, oh, it was so great to see you. It's time to go. Like just, again, you just have whatever you want to say, but be ready. I love that. Right?
I love seeing you, and I got to go.
Yeah, right. Goodbye. Right. I can't stand this. No, I'm just kidding. But it was so wonderful to see you. Yes.
We worry how other people are going to feel, and then we start to take responsibility for how they might feel. And that's not my responsibility. What they're thinking, what they're concluding, how they're feeling about me and my behaviors and my boundaries that we're talking about. It's not my responsibility.
And I would even go a step further and say it's not my business.
Yes.
Right? So, and that really helped me because in addition to it not being my problem, it's actually not for me to even think about. It's not my business.
It's not my business.
Yep.
Right. And it's really not. Because those are, if you think about it, I always think about it as stealing.
Yeah.
If I'm worried about what you think and how you feel and how you're going to react, and I start to take responsibility for that. Now, notice I said your feelings, your reactions, your thoughts, those are yours. They belong to you. That's
good call.
Those are your possessions. And when I try to manage that, I'm stealing from you what's yours and making it mine.
And that's that's just a weird feeling. And it's, I'm glad you put it in those terms to really, again, we're trying to drive the point home. It's okay to just worry about my own needs, my thoughts, my feelings, right?
Right.
And let others do the same.
Yes, and for extra credit, this holiday season that's
I love extra credit.
Yeah, right. So here's extra credit. When somebody asks you why, you know, you don't have to give a reason. Okay. The extra credit part, don't apologize.
Ooh, I love that.
Don't apologize. Say, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I realize I'm sorry."
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we can say double extra credit. You can say instead. So and that's hard. It's so reflexive for us. And that might be part of coping ahead is you envision yourself not apologizing. And if you have to say anything, just say, "Hey, thanks so much for understanding. I appreciate that you understand." And so what we're saying is I appreciate that you are choosing right now to validate my boundary.
Yes, I love that. I love that.
Notice how empowering this is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've coped ahead. We know how long we want to stay. We know what we want to eat. We know, kind of what are we going to ingest? Any of it, right?
Yes.
So I want to go back to what you mentioned earlier, but what do we talk about?
Yes.
Right?
Yes, that's a big stressor.
Or what if someone brings up a topic that I either don't feel is appropriate for me to talk about or I just don't want to talk about.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. And we know, I think even during COVID, holidays were particularly stressful because there was a whole vaccination debate.
Oh, yes.
And the intensity around that.
Yes.
And so whether it's vaccinations or this year, it could be the war in the Middle East. We've got political season that's upon us.
Oof,
so lots of hot potatoes.
Yep.
So
and assume there's going to be at least one relative or friend who wants to go there real bad.
Right. Yeah. Right? So let's talk about that first. Those hot topics. That we don't want to get burned on and we just want to avoid.
Yep.
So maybe just kind of in the outset, don't go there. Don't go there if you feel like it's going to be a contentious issue. There's no need to bring it up. There are so many other things we can talk about.
Yes.
And a lot of times when we think, hey, this would be a great topic, let's talk about it, it's really because I want to talk about it. It's very egocentric.
Good point.
I want to talk about this because I feel passionate about this and other people should agree with my position on it. So now I have an audience. And so we take what maybe we do privately on social media. And now we're going public at the family or company gathering.
Right.
And so there are so many other things. We let's find common ground on things to talk about rather than find something contentious to talk about.
Exactly. So again, this goes back to the coping ahead. You can think to yourself, you can have a list of 4 or 5 topics that you do enjoy talking about. It could be what's been going on with you. It could be questions you have for your loved ones, just anything, right?
Right.
And be ready to pull those out, right?
Right.
Especially if the topic goes to something that's more loaded. Again, there's nothing wrong with changing the subject, I think.
Absolutely.
I think it's okay
you
to just
get
say,
to determine that.
I'm going to change the subject, right? I also think that you get to say, and I was just thinking for people who feel like they need the extra step, you can convey to relatives, maybe it's a parent or someone close, before the day and say, hey, you know what? I just wanted to let you know that I'm not going to be talking about politics on Thanksgiving this year. Now, tailor it to what your family or what your people are like, right? So maybe that's extra for some people, but for some it's like, no, I need to say this in advance because the person involved or the people may not take no for an answer. Like in the moment, maybe like, well, come on, how can you not talk about this, right?
Right.
So,
right. Don't you care?
Don't you care?
In other words, just
are
notice.
You paying attention?
Yes, right. Notice all the should messages.
Yep.
You should care. You should want to talk about this. Yep. You should have more to eat. You should have a drink. And so
many shoulds. Yeah,
it's such a shitty environment at the holidays, and that is again where we lose that sense of empowerment. That it's not what other people are doing to us, though. I think that's an important thing to mention.
Yep.
It's not that this person is so difficult and this person is making me feel this.
Yep.
It's my life. I get to determine that if someone shoulds on me, I get to determine how I'm going to respond to that. I don't blame them for their behavior and how it affects me. I get to determine how things are going to affect me, how I'm going to respond to it.
Yep.
And again, coming back to coping ahead, I get to determine that right now.
Yes.
And anticipate this.
Yep.
Visualize how I'm going to respond to it. Visualize saying no. Visualize the person's reaction. Visualize and even experience some of the distress and feeling good with your boundary.
There you go. Yep. So I've even thought to myself, okay, if this or that topic comes up at this gathering, what are some things I can do? So if there's multiple people involved, I'll just slip away. Like I'll just go play with the kids, or I'll busy myself with the dishes, or I'll kind of assign myself a task, right?
Right.
And it's like, because again, you don't have to talk about anything you don't want to talk about. And this isn't avoidance. This is, if I am not, I choose to not get into some of these more intense conversations, right?
I'm kind of laughing because you said something very profound, and it's very simple and so commonsensical, and yet most profound things are. But you said, I don't have to talk about things I don't want to talk about.
Yes.
Like, ooh, I got to write that down.
Right?
Deep Thoughts by Krista Overson. Yeah,
You're
you don't have to talk. Yeah.
Well, and so maybe just because that stood out, like, again, I think people don't really believe that. Like, I think people don't believe. We forget, especially with when you go to a gathering of people, it's like anything's fair game, it seems, right? And because a lot of people struggle with their own boundaries, they might intrude, or they might question you about something, right?
Yes.
So you can even think about, maybe it's not politics. Maybe you don't care so much about politics, the news, what's going on in the world, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe for you, it's personal things that you either have gone through or questions that you just prefer not to answer, because there's going to be a relative, and this has happened to me, who comes in and is like, what's going on with this? And like points right at the thing that I'm like, that I just don't want to go there.
Right.
And because it might be none of their business, right? Or it might be something I just prefer to keep private, right?
Right.
So
it's the holidays. I need a break from that.
Yes. So again, be ready. And so my technique with that one is I kind of give, a short answer or, something, and then I immediately ask them a question about themselves. So if you can get the person talking about themselves, you're in the clear, right? Because people want to talk about themselves too.
Take the spotlight off yourself.
There you go.
Put it on them.
There you go. Yeah. Exactly.
That's a very empowering thing to do. I really appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
And I think we can control the conversation. We don't have to respond. We can pivot away, do some other activity. We can pivot and ask them a question about themselves. We can just say, hey, you know what? I appreciate you asking about the divorce. And I just don't want to talk about it.
There you go. Yeah. That's another, if you want to be more direct, just say, I'm just not going to talk about that tonight.
Yeah, needing a break from it.
Yeah, there you go.
Thanks for the concern.
There you go. Right, validating.
And sometimes people they're just generally concerned. Like, hey, I haven't seen you. I'm worried about you. You doing okay? And we can misinterpret that as someone kind of violating our boundaries.
Right.
And they don't know. They don't know. It's just good intention. So in other words, you lead talk about this a million times on the podcast. You lead with validation for how you think about somebody else, and you lead with validation for what they're saying. Even if it's that person who is just bound and determined, we're going to talk politics today.
Yep.
Still, the way we talked about this on another podcast is validation of superpower. You bring down with this superpower of validation, you bring down their emotion by validating them. And all you have to say is, hey, that sounds like it's really important to you. That makes sense.
Yep.
And I just choose not to go there.
Yep, exactly.
But when we validate first, the person, it brings it down. They're getting some validation.
There you go.
It's easier for you and for them to pivot away from it.
Exactly. Yeah, like you said, just saying like, thanks for the concern, right? That's a simple way of doing that, right?
Thanks you.
Thanks for the concern. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Thanks for highlighting that, Krista. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Can we talk about, because I think there's this other one, and I remember as a kid, oh gosh, like, what do I say when Grandma and Grandpa ask me kind of this innocuous question? So, what's new?
Good call.
I don't know what's yeah, and there's just panic. I don't know what to say, and how do we respond? What do we talk about? How do we have that small talk? And I think that's where coping ahead is really good. There is, you could look up date questions, like first date questions or date questions for married couples. These are great questions to just ask people.
Totally.
And I remember my wife and I, once we were out, and I had these questions ready to go. And one of them, it was really fascinating. I said, so here's one question. I just read it off. If you could be anybody for one day,
I love that.
in history or currently, if you could be anybody for one day, who would you be? And it was so fun.
That is. I'm trying to think of my answer now.
Yeah, I want to know.
Well, you have to say yours.
I will. Well, first, I was so impressed by her because she said Mother Teresa. And I'm like, Mother Teresa, like, talk about a really uncomfortable day. I mean, she never wore shoes that fit her, gave them to other people. Her feet were all, disfigured. And I'm thinking.
She's in the streets of Calcutta. Like,
yeah. And so I thought that was cool. And I'm like, okay. Tell me why.
Yay.
Why did you pick her?
Nice.
That's really interesting. And then I can share a little bit of, wow, that surprises me. And like, why would you say that?
Yep.
And so my answer was, I wanted to be, it didn't matter any particular president, but I wanted to be the president of the United States for one day. And she's like, why in the world would you want that? And I said, because I want to know all the stuff that's really going on that we never hear about.
I love that. The top secret stuff, right?
Yeah.
Good point.
So we had a great discussion. But you can go online and just type in like date questions or questions for
or like icebreaker questions.
Yeah, icebreaker questions. Have those at the ready. Even have it on your phone.
Why not?
And it's no insult to just pull it up and say, hey, I found these really cool questions and I got them on my phone that I want to ask people. So if you could be somebody for a day, who would you be?
Exactly.
So that really helps get discussion going.
I was thinking Mozart because I want to know what it's like to be a musical genius for a day. Just see like what is the world of a musical genius.
I thought you were a musical genius.
Well,
already,
I am.
Krista.
I am. Yes. But I mean like another.
We're still waiting for the bonus material of you singing at the end.
Hey, subscribe. Like and subscribe.
Right. Yeah, like and subscribe, and maybe
hit the bell for notifications every time we, have a new episode. But no, I love that idea. And you highlighted another important thing, which is the difference between a close-ended question and an open-ended question in conversation, right?
Right.
Close-ended question is something someone can answer with one word, right? A yes or no question, one word. An open-ended question is a question that invites someone to elaborate. So like you said, who would you be if you could be anyone for a day? And then the open-ended part of it was, and tell me why, right?
Ooh,
so they have to expand, right?
Yeah, tell me why. And really what's behind this is I think we are generally interested in other people.
Yes.
I think as part of the human condition, we are actually interested. We keep the spotlight on us and think, what do I say?
I have
What
to
do I
talk about
talk
myself.
about? Yeah, I got to talk about myself. And and what are they thinking of me? And so we make it all about us when in reality, we're trying to make it about them.
Yep.
And questions like this keep the spotlight off of us. And we can share a little bit about ourselves too.
Totally.
Because you don't want that person that's just always asking the questions and never shares anything about themselves either. You kind of feel like you're being interrogated.
Yep.
So some self-disclosure is really good to making connection.
Yep.
And so also just get people talking about themselves.
Yes, exactly.
These questions that we talk about are ways to get people to talk about themselves. And they'll think you're terrific. They will. They will. Their estimation of you will soar.
Right.
Because they will conclude, wow, that person is really interested. That person actually asked me questions about
and they actually
my
care.
life. Yes.
Yeah, they actually care what's going on with me.
One thing that is okay as well is to ask the tough question.
Okay.
Hey, I know you lost your job. Been thinking about you. How you doing with that?
That's a great point. I'm glad you mentioned that because I think we're afraid to bring up those topics. Like, something big happened in someone's life.
Yes.
You don't necessarily have to go into a whole thing and ask a bunch of questions about it. But just like you said, you're kind of just acknowledging it and saying, hey, I'm so sorry about, your loss of this or that, right? Or I'm so sorry it sounds like you had a tough month with blank or whatever, right? And that invites them to say more if they want to, but at least shows I'm thinking of you.
Right, because otherwise people kind of go into the holidays, and this is my family. These are the people that really care about me.
Yep.
And they never asked about this element of my life, and it's the elephant in the room. Everybody dances around.
Right.
And somebody leaves feeling really invalidated.
Yep.
And it's not that people are trying to invalidate, and it's not that people don't care. They're just so worried. Oh, I don't want to, stress you out. And it's okay. And let other people set their boundaries.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Because who knows? Maybe they've coped ahead too.
You're right. Yes. And I think if we cope ahead, we don't just survive the holidays. We can really thrive. Because what are we doing? We're empowering ourselves. So I like to tell my clients, it's your life.
Yes.
You get to determine how you're going to live it.
Yep.
And other people aren't going to determine that for you. Other people are going to try.
Yeah.
And they'll always try.
Yes.
And ultimately, it always comes down to you. So it's your life.
Yep.
You get to choose how you're going to live it. And I'm excited about this podcast because I think as people put this into practice and they really do cope ahead, they're really empowering themselves, and they're not going to simply survive the holidays. They're going to thrive, and it's going to feel great.
Right. It doesn't have to be as stressful as you're thinking it might be, right?
Correct.
If you're looking at this holiday season and you're thinking, I'm already stressed, start to look at what are the factors that I do have control over. Because stress is basically this feeling of there's pressure put on me, more pressure being placed on me from externally than I can handle. That's like the illusion of stress, right? So when you think about that, look at what are the factors that I can do something about, right? With all the stress, you could even list it. What are the things I'm stressed about for the holidays? And then go through it line by line. What are the things I can do something about? And you might end up feeling a lot better.
You will feel a lot better. I can pretty much guarantee it. Or your money back from our podcast today.
Oh my gosh, we should have a money back guarantee.
Well, let's just do it, okay?
Now I have to sing.
Yes, yeah. We do think, you will feel great as you apply this for your holidays because you're taking control of your life. You're really empowering yourself, and you'll be able to live up to your expectations for yourself, freed from other people's expectations. You're going to know, how do I handle those awkward moments? And you're going to be prioritizing your mental health and doing all of this without any sense of apology for you being you and living your life the way you want and need to live it. So we are hopeful and confident that as you apply this, it's going to be a very happy holiday season.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you as always for listening, and please be sure to leave us a review. While this podcast can't be a replacement for therapy, we hope you enjoyed our discussion today and join us again next time. Nystrom & Associates is always available to those who are struggling. If you find yourself in need of support and help, please check us out at nystromcounseling.com.